Hello everybody, it's Mike here at Game from Scratch, and today we are talking about Pixel Game Maker MV, which was just finally released out of early access to final release. And this is a game engine that should sound familiar. It's similar to RPG Game Maker in that they share a publisher and a goal. Whereas RPG Game Maker is all about creating JRPG style games, Pixel Game Maker is for creating platformers and side-scrollers and shoot-'em-up style games, all requiring no programming. Now when this was first released in early access back in July of 2018, I picked it up, checked it out, and gave you a recommendation if you should buy it or not. And the answer was no. No, you should not buy it. At least that was my opinion at the time. The amount of content in it was anemic. The game engine made no sense. And a lot of it was still actually not even translated yet to English. So what we're doing now that it is finally out and available on Steam is we're going to check it out and decide if it is worthwhile to grab today. So here you can see it is up on Steam. It was released full the 1.0 release was on September the 19th. And you can see here also, there is now, where the hell did you go? Anyways, if you go into the news, here we go. 30-day trial is now available. So there's a full functioning 30-day trial, so you can check this out. So if you just wanted to mute me and go check it out for yourself, well, I'm kind of hurt. But yeah, go ahead and do so. 30 days to check it out, and that's a good move. Any game engine that is trying to charge you should give you some kind of a hands-on check this thing out. Now, as you can see, it's $67 Canadian, so that's probably $55 US, I'm guessing there, but somewhere in that area. And it is currently 30% off. All right, that's it for the introduction. Again, 30-day trial if you want to go check it out yourself. But what we're going to do right now is go hands-on. This is Pixel Game Maker in its new project settings screen, and we're just going to go ahead and we're going to create a new project. Now, one of the things that's really changed here, and this is definitely an improvement, is before I said the content was kind of anemic. Now there is a ton of samples to get you started with full assets and everything. This is definitely a nice development. Now you're going to notice there's a lot of Japanese intermixed with English, and if you see Japanese characters here, know that you're also going to get Japanese variables and comments in the actual example, making it a little hard to follow along. But there is a ton of stuff here to get you up and going, different things to trial out. Like this guy right here, Dungeons of Nazareth, that is a Ghost and Goblins clone. There's a side-scrolling and top-view fantasy-style game. There's some dice rolling games and so on. We're going to go ahead and create the side-scrolling fantasy one. Now, what's kind of interesting here is up here you set your project, and here's where you save it. But as soon as you click this, it just goes ahead and creates it. There's no more do you wish to continue kind of process there. Just boom, and it creates it. Now, I should do a full disclosure here. This video has been somewhat frustrating to create because the machine I normally record everything on crashes every single time at that point. So do be aware, there are some stability issues on 50% of the machines I've tested this on, so your mileage may vary. I checked the forums, there's nobody else is reporting these crashes, so perhaps it's just my bad luck. So here we are in Pixel Game Maker MV, and I actually find their UI, it could use some streamlining, but it has definitely got some streamlining from when I checked it out over a year ago. For one, it's totally localized now, so you actually get, full English on the tabs and so forth. And we're going to look at a simple kind of concept of a game. So what you've got here is your game is broken up into scenes. We got various different scenes here. So you can see right there the different stages and so on. So we're going to go to stage 01. And you notice at the top here, there are different layers. And you can create your own. So you can add new layers here. You can name them. So we've got the background layer, background layer, background layer, background layer, the far layer, so stuff way off in the back, the main layer that everything's happening on, and you can also see you've got collision meshes going on, and those are for your various different tiles. So you paint things exactly how you would expect. So basically, we could drop a new layer. So we'll grab that guy right there. We'll go into BG2, and we could add new trees. And that is what your painting process is like. Now, one of the big things where Pixel Game Maker really shines is it's got all of your tools in one place. So you've got your level editor here. You've got stuff here for audio, for animations, for transitions, for physics, and so on. Then you've also got, so this was the scenes that we were in here. You can populate objects into your characters. So here, for example, we've got the character. This is where you start, and there's already one instance. And you can go ahead and create things like characters and torches and so on in the world. You go into torch creation mode, and then boom, you can drop a torch into the world. And then you see the various different properties, so I could, rotate or position it over here. It's a very menu-heavy game in terms of game-making creation tool. So you've got a lot of reading to do to figure out exactly what's going on. But this is nice. The world editor is quite solid. You can set the zooming mode. You can change the different tile size and so on. And there are also a ton of tiles out there. We'll get to the tiles in a second. We've also got physics options here, so we can do bonded, rope, spring, axis, explosion, and gravity. We can put physics on objects, have them drop down in the world. So that's definitely nice. And then we've got things for pathing and so on, creating cameras, etc. So that is the scenes list. So that's replacing, so you got your scenes, which is the scenes themselves, the objects, which are things like your character and so on. This is the instance list over here, the physics, portals, and so on. There's where your portal will lead off to. So that's kind of the world editing. That's your scene up here. And again, we looked through the tiles that you can paint with. As you saw, you can do multiple selections with your tiles like so. Then we've got the objects. Again, these are things that you create, like your characters and instanced items into the world, physics, and then other. Over here, we're going to the tile section. This is where you define your tile maps. Now, the tile maps, you can see for these particular tiles, have collisions defined. So that's what this red is going on. So if I hit down Control, we can zoom in, but you can see the directions that you can collide and come into it. We can turn that off. We can do some editing for slopes, for walls, and so on. And then the defaults will handle all of this stuff. Then you've got a number of properties that you can define here. So you can add targets that can interact with it. You can have sliding object force. You can change the colors of it. You can change the physics, rebound, and friction, and so on. And that is defined at the tile level. As you can see, you can have multiple tile sets defined. And you can paint with multiple tile sets when you're back in the scene. So tiles is pretty straightforward. Animations is exactly what it sounds like. It is for creating animations for your character. The nice thing is there are a ton of sprites included now, which is what I think it needed all along. Now, as you can see, some things are not translated. It makes it a little bit difficult to guess what these particular animation tracks are all about. As you see, we've got a wait animation, a walk animation. We can preview the walk animation with a bit of onion skinning going on. We can turn our grid on and off. It's very light, hard to see. You can zoom in and out. So we're zoomed in 800%, so we can zoom out quite a bit. I think I can also use Control and Scroll for that middle mouse button to pan around. So as you can see, you can set different directions for it. This is going to flip the player over. Like so, you can see like the flip direction is being defined right there, or the direction that they're moving is being defined right there. And then frame details. So you can do a number of different frames for a character. But yeah, that's a player character with a number of different motions applied. You can see the sprite sheets that are being used and the individual frames from those sprite sheets. So that's where the animation tool comes in. Next up, we have objects. Objects is kind of the heart of the game in some ways. This is where you do your programming. And programming is done using a flow graph state machine kind of approach. So here you can see we're at the action programs. There is a lot of tabs here, by the way. So for the player, you can see it's got even the player icon beside, or the torch. Torch has one grip. Very simple to understand. The torch has the wait task, and the wait task does whatever is over here, basically. So we've got a property set. This guy isn't going to be affected by gravity, and it's going to show a particle system of particle underscore torch. So that's kind of how things are defined to it. We go back to our player, we'll see a much more advanced version. So you see here your default wait, and then wait feeds off to either walk or let's see, walk or out of walk, or from walk to jump, from walk to attack, and so on. So how do you decide when you go from waiting to walking? Well, that's where these links come in. So we'll see wait, and then you've got properties defined for wait. We've got the link between wait and walk. You'll see this is based off of conditionals. So change if any condition is met, or change if all conditions are met, and so on. And then you can define the conditions down here. The following input has been pressed, and you can do those there, or we can define our own other conditions, so like hit detection. And then again, we've got some weird UI decisions here. For example, what is a 1? What is a 2? There's no real breakdown of what is in between 1 and 2. You just kind of got to split between them. But you kind of get the idea of how it goes. You could switch between scenes, you could execute scripts, and so on. And then you can also add plugins. We'll talk about plugins in just a minute. But this is your programming structure. You basically have a bunch of states that you can loop through, and then these connecting lines are the conditions to move between those states. You can also have variables that are being handled and so on. So that is your action program, your basic settings. As I said, there are these scenes with tons and tons and tons of properties you can set for just about everything, or you can just ignore it. So really the only thing being set for this guy, you've got the basic attack parameters such as the hit points, the max hit points, and so on. So it's kind of defined for certain style of genres that you take damage, you've got hit points, and so on. Or you can ignore those things once again. And You can see down here, not pushed back by other objects is the only thing that's really selected. But destroy when off camera for more than 2 seconds, fix relative position to the camera. So this is where your various different basic properties are setting. Your moving and jumping details are defined here for like how high to move, what the acceleration should be like. And again, it's this wall of text that you configure through. Parent-child relationships are defined here. We can do variable management. Here's where you can define all the variables in your game. This one has a ton defined. For example, hit points, you get a description, a value, and a variable name, and then you can use these variables in your scripts or in your actions. These could be conditional based off of one of the conditions could actually be a variable. So switch variable changes or come back here. I think there's another variable settings. But basically, you can branch off of variable settings and you define your variables in the variable management section. And then we've got switch management, side of the kind of the same code, affect other physics, default values, and so on. These are kind of like, I think, glorified Booleans, basically, for switching between states. Then we go over here to the resources. This is where all of the things used to create your game are organized. So you see here, there is a font. Again, I can use Control and middle mouse button to zoom in on it. So we're in the images. So there's a bunch of font images. We can come in here to the player, and the player has your various different sprite sheets that are used in the animation section. We've got sections here for fonts that can be defined. And again, the font uses an image that's defined here, which again, back here, font 6x10, we go back to images, font 6x10. So that's where the font is getting its image from. We can create text strings. This is nice sort of in case you're doing localizations later on, but if you've got text that you're going to display, you could define it as a variable here in text. We can bring in videos. I don't think there are any in this example. Background music, and the background music also has, so there's a number that are defined, which again is nice to see actual content that's shipped with it. And then you can preview it right there. Sorry if I blew your ears out there. Same deal for sound effects, basically the exact same controls, but you can set up the volume and pitch on individual sound effects, and you can preview them as well. Voices, I don't really know what that is, to be honest. Again, we can define other variables here, switches, and animations. So that is under the various different resources that are available for your game. Transitions is the progression of your game. So we got start, go to stage 1. And it's a way of kind of doing, again, program flow. And then finally, we're getting into the plugins. Now, plugins is your way of extending it. If you're wondering, behind the scenes, it uses Cocos 2DX. And this kind of segues nice. So you can define your own code using the Cocos framework and JavaScript. Now let's get into the help for a second. So look, you'll back here to help documentation. Over we go. So here you see the help. The help is pretty solid, actually, and it's well localized. So you can see a bit of a description of what the various different pieces that we work with, working on creating and placing tiles in your game world. But if we come down here, there's also documentation on what a plugin is, and then more specifically under documents, plugins. And what you'll see here is you can call Cocos 2DX JSP API and script plugins, and the link is right there. Otherwise, you can go here and get more in-depth details, 14 pages, in fact, of documentation on the plugin architecture. So if you want to extend it, you can. I also believe there is a marketplace for sharing the plugins that you've created or others have created. So you can get a bit of an ecosystem going there for extending it. But the language of choice there, if you do not want to be using the built-in oops, wrong screen. Let me just get that back up. If you do not want to be programming using, let's go back to objects. This is the primary way you would code your game, is the action programs. If you don't want to do it this way, so wait, jump the various different pieces going on there. If you don't want to code using this flow graph system, your only other option really available is to extend the game engine using the JavaScript programming language. And again, you have access to the underlying Cocos 2DX graphics game and sound and various different other things like tween libraries, input libraries, and so on of Cocos 2DX if you want to get down into the guts of things. So that is where plugins come in. And then plugins can be used directly in, where are plugins? I think they're in the object settings. But anyways, you can start integrating plugins directly into your game, and you can invoke them as actions down here. So other runtime actions, you're going to find there is a plugins option. So you could invoke your plugin as an action at anywhere that you've got the ability to call this. And once again, here is a strange bit of UI where you have 1, 2, and 3 of, I don't know. it's just kind of splitting things across. But you see the kind of traditional things you'd want to do: display an image, play a video, so on and so forth. Everything you would kind of expect is here, including things for like transitioning between scenes. So here's an end scene. There's one for, and weirdly enough, it's in a different category. So you got end scene in one, and then you've got load and create scene in an, so, and we could do things like scene effects, shake the scene, change out layers, and so on. But you're kind of going to have to, like, why is scene stuff here and then scene stuff is here? That part doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But it is kind of nice to see it all go. You can also debug your code directly here, so you can play your code as it loops through, and you got a trial down here, and it will actually show you. Let me just see. So whatever is being invoked, you're seeing the program flow as it is executing. So that's definitely nice. Gives you ability to kind of debug what you are working on as you are working on it. Finally, we'll get into a bit of the settings for the stuff. You can control a bunch of things. Again, this guy is an absolute wall of these property screens that you come into. But the cool thing is they've got some stuff here for if you're doing retro pixel style games, you can actually create that retro console look. For example, we could blur it, make it look like an analog TV. So we'll turn that up a bit. Let's put a little bit of blur on here. Retro game console a whole lot, and then we'll apply that. Let's actually go back and see what that does to our game. So you come back here, launch your game by pressing the play icon there, and there you see all of those effects that we just filtered on and layered on there are being applied. So that's actually kind of cool, actually. You've got things here for controlling the keys that are mapped or defined. You can change them out there. It's weird. I actually ran into a little bit of a problem here. So for example, if I come down here, oh, actually something is taking over my mouse. All right, so come down here and I wanted to create a new input entity. It wouldn't actually let me. So press a key. So I've got it highlighted, and then I'm pressing the J key, and it's not doing anything. So I don't know if this is literally a bug, if it's not implemented yet, or whatever is going on here. But I have had trouble redefining the keys or creating new keys for some strange reason. I'm not sure what it is. But you can see here what the default mappings are. Maybe if I come over and create it in this category. Now I'm in mouse. All right, so I don't know what's going on. There's a weirdness in this display, but there's a couple things like that for the most part. You can also create groups, things that work together, easily add a new one. The user interface is consistent, but you will find there is definitely going to be a little bit of UI refinement that could be done. But basically, this is it. I have to say, across the board, we got a lot of things here. We got animated tiles in here now. We've got a lot more built-in content than we did before. It's definitely more of a recommendation at this point in time. The programming interface is cleaner. It makes more sense. I love the fact that it's absolutely loaded with content now. I like that there are those retro filters in there. I like that most of what you would need is here. So things like your tile map editors, your animation editors are all here. You've got this integrated programming language that, you know what, if you've never programmed before, I can definitely see how this could work for you, but it is a ton of menus to dig through, and there could definitely be a little bit of an optimization to organize these things a little bit better for sure, but this is a much improved program over what it was in July. Would I use it? Probably not. Would I recommend it? Depends. If what you saw here, if this jumps and this sinks into your head, especially if you like this more than you like the idea of using a scripting language, then this may be great for you. If you're not turned off by these big walls of text for configuring things, and if you saw, I guess the most important thing is what you saw in the configuration options, what you're seeing in all of these settings, if it covers the kind of game you're trying to create. Because if you're trying to create something that this isn't capable of doing, so if you're moving outside of that pixel scroller type game development environment, you're probably going to struggle. Like, for example, I don't know, and this is not 100%, this is literally I don't know, if you can set the maps up as isometric, and I don't think I've seen anything to see that you could. So if you wanted to create a hexagonal or isometric game, I don't know that you can literally even do it in this engine. Everything is set up for this art style. Not a bash on the engine, it's just one of those things to be aware of. If you want to do something that it can't do it. And I don't think any amount of plugins are going to be more for It's not going to be for creating that intensive of a change. The plugin system is going to be more for adding actions and that kind of stuff than it is going to be for adding, say, isometric tiles to the game. So if the functionality you don't want isn't here, yeah, obviously it's not the right engine for you. And that's true of any kind of dedicated styled engine. And they're going for a specific niche of that platformer, shoot 'em up or top down, Smash TV style game development. And if that is the area you're in, and again, what you see in terms of the walls of text and configuration and so on, I can see a lot to recommend here. All you really need to do is pick up a sprite editing tool like ASC Sprite, and you've got pretty much everything you need to create a game included here. And it's definitely better. There are certainly areas I could see for needing improvement, but it works a heck of a lot better than it did back a year ago. So that's where my recommendation is now. If this looks like it's appealing to you, definitely check out that 30-day trial. It's a more viable engine, whereas in July of last year, my recommendation was stay the hell away. It was awkward, with all the awkward it has now. It had 10 times that. It wasn't efficient. It didn't come with a whole lot of content. So they've improved a lot of the biggest negatives. So if you checked it out in July and you liked parts of it but were turned off by other parts of it, I definitely recommend that you check it out again. There is a ton of content included with this guy. There is a ton in here. Again, unfortunately, a lot of it isn't localized to English necessarily, but you can definitely learn from it and figure out what's going on, except for maybe, when key variable names or global switches or such aren't in English. It does make kind of game logic a little bit tricky to figure out, but there is a lot here to recommend now, whereas before, that wasn't the case. Although, again, one final warning, one of my two machines, this crashes every time on, so even if you are like, yes, I'm going to get it, get that 30-day trial, make sure it runs on your machine before you commit. But this is definitely an improving engine. Now, I do leave a question to you. Are you interested in seeing a tutorial on this? A little 5-parter getting started. Here's how you create your game, your levels, your character, animate your character, make it die, make it shoot, and so on, or not so much. Let me know if you have any interest at all in the comments down below. Also, did you check out Pixel Game Maker back in July when it was first released? Do you see a lot of improvement there, or are you still looking at this going, nah, not for me? Let me know all those things, comments down below, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye for now.